Alrighty, folks, it is 10:35 here on the East Coast. Welcome to Twitch Line, your home for relationship advice here on Twitch. It is a beautiful Sunday evening, and we are here live again to start off our Sunday focus segments. Joining me as my co-caster and co-host and best friend to Twitch Line, it is Acorn. How you doing, buddy?
Very well, sir. I just got back from an Sunday evening movie with my wife. We saw Joker,
Was that as
very
freaky and
serious and
scary?
scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? They did a really great job with it. They take a character that could easily be turned into kind of a cartoony, silly thing, and made it very human. So, definitely
What?
like an emotional ride and psychological ride.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go there if you're looking for like action entertainment, superficial stuff. But if you want to think and you want to be entertained, kind of knowing that the background story is definitely Gotham City, the Joker, and all that, but it's a lot more real. So yeah, I liked it.
Good. So, does the question that I want to ask with regards to it before we get started here with our Sunday Focus segment is, does it humanize the Joker too much? Because remember, he's a bad guy, and I think a lot of people were worried that people will be too enamored with him with regards to him still being a crazy psychopath, but giving him a softer side, people were afraid that, like, oh my God, that's going to make somebody like really love the bad guy. Is that the case, or is that
I think
overblown?
there might be some people that would connect with his plight, but I think that one should. I think that the idea that villains are just all evil in every way and that you have to hate them is unreal and therefore unbelievable. Every
Alrighty.
bad person in the history of humanity has also had something redeeming about them, I guess, at some point in life. I don't know.
Yes.
But worth a watch, anyways.
Yeah. So go check it out there, folks. It is a approved movie here by Twitchline. Let's get our socials infos out of the way for those who are joining us new. You can contact us via email here at twitchlinelove@gmail.com. You can send us articles, questions, things you want us to comment on, and we will do so live on the stream. You can also tweet us also at Twitchline on Twitter, so you can contact us directly that way if you want some quick links or images or photos that you would love for us to talk about. You can also listen to us on and watch us on YouTube. We stream directly to YouTube live at the same time we do here on Twitch. So that's where we archive all of our older shows. Search Twitchline Love Relationship Advice, and you'll find our channel there. You can check out our older shows if you are interested in a lot of the older topics that we go over. Great place to just sort of kick back and watch some of the older Twitch line content. And also, if you want to watch us and take us on the go, you can listen to us on SoundCloud. We're available on SoundCloud, where you can listen to us on your mobile devices, iPads, mobile phones, any laptops or anything like that. Then you can take Twitch Line on the go if you want to listen to us here, not at your home. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It is this Sunday evening, and we are going to be doing the Sunday Focus segment. And today, we will try to focus on a topic that I think everybody goes through with regards to relationships, and that is the topic of fear and how you relate to it in your relationship life. And Tim, fear is something that everybody has, especially before and during a relationship with regards to, can I ask this person out? Will I be feared? Will I be rejected? Should I even ask him out because I know she's going to say no? Things go through people's heads all the time, and it can be a motivating factor in them doing or not doing something with regards to a relationship.
Absolutely. And we're going to go over, I mean, there are many fears in life, but I picked kind of four categories that I thought applied specifically to love and relationships and the world of dating. And while we have moved into a more technology-driven world of dating, the same basic fears still are inside of us. Our humanity is not, when you digitize everything else, we are still human. We still have emotional response, and fear, whether it is warranted or not, exists, and it's worth knowing because then you can do something about it. So, just before we get into this, I think it's important to say that when we're talking about fear tonight, we're not talking about physical fear, and that anyone listening, if you have physical fear in your life, in your relationships, you should absolutely do what you have to get out of that dangerous situation and get to safety. And that's, people, they live every day in their relationships with abuse and violence, and what we go over here tonight is not directed towards that kind of issue. So hopefully people will take care of themselves and get themselves into a safe place. For tonight, it's more about the psychology and emotions of fear as it applies to self-esteem, self-doubt, and just putting yourself out there. So to start us off, I think the first category of fear that we'll be talking about tonight, and this is something we've talked about again and again, especially on Wednesday night Reddit response, is the fear of rejection. So we all know it. Anyone who's ever put themselves out there in the world, unless you just happen to be that lucky lotto winner and managed to find the love of your life on the first go, and they said yes, and you guys are just living the Disney life. By the way, you don't exist. But anyways, if you do have the experience of asking someone out and putting yourself out there, then you probably have had a taste or two of rejection. And that initial fear might exhibit as anxiety when you're thinking about how do I get this person into a conversation with me? How do I make them know that I exist? And people will begin with something like I said, anxiety, but in the anticipation of approaching and the anticipation of making that connection, it will grow into something more significant like fear, especially people who avoid approaching and who develop a relationship with the approach that is actually tinged with the fear of rejection, knowing that if they go in there, there is at least a chance that they will be knocked down and possibly hurt. And if they're not ready for that, then they're likely to avoid it. And if they avoid it, then that will cycle up and the fear will build. So that initial approach is probably one of the hardest hurdles to get over. Z, do you have any anxiety? Like if you think about it now, maybe not approaching a woman right now where you are in your life, but in your earlier years when you didn't have a lot of experience with it, did you have that kind of anxiety or even a fear?
Oh, absolutely. It's the fear of rejection was a big motivating factor, especially in my early life, because it wasn't a matter of fact if they knew I existed. That's a little different, I think, in my case, but I knew all of the people that I liked. I had a friendly relationship with all of them. And the thing about it is I was afraid in a lot of cases of ruining what I had with somebody because they would say no and it would get awkward or something like that. And it's just, that was a big motivating factor in my life. One of the first girls I actually regretted never actually saying anything about was somebody in high school that she ended up moving away after a while, but we became close friends. But it was one of those things in which I really, really regretted not approaching her and saying, hey, like, I think we should, be more than friends and stuff. And, in high school, you're awkward with regards to it. But I was desperately infatuated with this person, and I never really acted on it. I told her, years later, I was, at the time I was 15, and I told her when I was visiting her when I was like 25 and more settled in, already a professional, and she already had ended up getting married, and like we were out in Jakarta, like talking, and it was just one of those things, and I was like, it's funny. Because like you were sitting here, I'm sitting there, you're getting married and stuff like that, and I never really told you that I was like really infatuated with you when I was in high school. And she was like, really? It's like, why didn't you say something? It was like, because my mom would have probably loved it. I was like, what are you talking about? It's like, my mother loved you. He's like, it's like she's not really infatuated with the guy that I'm marrying, but like, it was that was actually hilarious when she told me that, because my mom and her mom were really really good friends, and it was just one of those things that fear motivated me into not acting, because I thought that it would get odd, it would get weird, family friends. Probably would have like then had to go up to her and would have to see her at any times I would have to go to Indonesia and make it just weird and odd. And I just didn't want to ruin that. And I found out later that she was very open to it if I would have asked her. And it's a regret, and it hit actually really hard, because she passed away 3 years ago from an accident. And it was one of those things. I was like, man, it's like it made me think about the whole relationship altogether, and it was very, very odd. And it was like, man, I really regret that. It was like one of my lifelong regrets that I never acted on that and never took that anywhere. And it's one of those life lessons that you sort of learn later on, that it's like, life's too short for you to be afraid of stuff. And it was one of those things in which it's like when she passed away, when I heard about that, and you sort of think about all the times that my fear prevented me from actually acting on it when I was a little 15-year-old know nothing. It was just very very regretful. So that's my personal story
Yeah.
about that. So
Well,
mm.
it sounds like the one that got away, kind of like the kind of story. I'm
Almost.
really sorry to hear about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was one of those. It was almost one of those stories, but it's like, she ended up having 3 kids, having a happy life up to the point where, when she fell, it was something so stupid. It's like she fell in the shower, hit her head, and bled so much that she didn't wake up. And it's like
That's
it's one.
actually pretty common.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things in which it's like, my boss and I at work joke about, it's like, I could be hit by the bread truck tomorrow. And it's more of a saying of like, you can go at any time for any reason, and the world is not sympathetic to, like, just, if that person is a really nice person or a really evil person. It's even all the way, So it's like, but it was one of those things that, fear in the moment, a fear of rejection in the moment can paralyze you and into inaction. But after a while, life experience actually will teach you is that fear is bullshit. And that's my take
Right.
on it. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Mm.
so, having had a friendship with her, having history,
Hmm.
the approach that I was originally talking about is not exactly doesn't exactly apply to that situation. You're talking more about the approach of the approaching, bringing up the idea of a relationship or
Yeah, yeah.
something like that.
Hmm.
Uh, for people that are sitting back, in their chair at a bar and questioning whether or not that person across the bar gave them a kind of a welcoming look or an opportunity to step up and say something, that is, like you said, it is the moment where you have to decide whether or not you're going to try, and you could get knocked down, but at the same time, without taking that step, there is no future to that moment. There's no possibility for there to be the beginning of a friendship, relationship, anything else. So
Hmm.
just being able to take that initial step is key to everything else happening. So that's why it's one of the most important things to be aware of when you're thinking about your fears and how to deal with the possibility of rejection. Because if you go through life not avoiding this kind of approach, fear and anxiety, you may be opting out of meaningful relationships and romance and love and all of that.
Hmm.
So it's pretty significant.
It's
One of
funny.
the
It's
go ahead.
funny you say, like, it's like, the thing about it is a lot of the relationships, and this is, everybody's different, of course, is a lot of the relationships that either I have rejected due to fear or what otherwise is like there's none of that cold approach. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's none of the like
Right.
random meets with a girl that maybe, hey, I should ask this person out. But it just doesn't. It didn't happen in my sort of dating life. So there was really not a lot of that. So,
Right,
people are
and
different.
the cold
So,
open is
mhm,
not like it's not that doesn't have to be the standard. A lot of people they
mhm,
make a connection through a friend or you're at a social circle
exactly.
where social situation where everyone's already talking, but you still maybe you don't have to make the approach like walking across a bar or something, but you do have to open conversation, and this leads directly into our next part of the fear of rejection, which is maintaining conversation, being a good conversationalist, and being confident in yourself that you can be someone that someone wants to sit across from and talk to for a while. And I think you have that confidence, so you can go and talk to anyone. And
Hmm.
romance or not, that skill set is there. So for people who don't have that ability to, don't have the gift of gab or whatever, or don't have the ability to not just open but then maintain communication, they might feel, well, at any minute now, this person's going to be done with me. They're going to look at me like I'm an idiot for talking about something they don't care about. I'm going to say the wrong thing. There's there's this sort of dialogue that goes on in their heads. And so instead of dealing with being rejected during a conversation, they just won't. They just won't. They'll sort of sit on the sideline, stay quiet, and watch other people do it. And, while some people are attracted to the silent, quiet types, uh, you may be missing out there too.
Hmm.
Another element of the fear of rejection is uh, being rejected because of your physicality. If you wonder, are you attractive enough to talk to that person there? Are you tall enough to be getting attention from this beautiful woman over here? Are you thin enough to be getting attention from this handsome guy over here? Are you muscular enough to compete with these other guys in here that are going to the gym? All of these ideas of what you think this person that you do not know might want romantically, and you're sizing yourself up. You're saying, I don't even know if I'm good enough to take that first step with you because I may not qualify. And that fear, just like the others, will put people in a, a sort of failure to launch situation where they won't even step out because they know there's a possibility they're going to get shut down for something they have no control over, or at least can't change in the moment. You can't really fake that stuff. So that's another worry. And the fourth piece, the last one before we move on from rejection, is related to sex. So the people who can get past the initial approach and they can get through the conversation, the attraction's there. So there's some people out there that are still afraid of being rejected at the point of becoming intimate, and they may have body issues, like they may not be happy with their body. They may think that there's something about their body that's unattractive to the opposite sex or same sex, whoever they're with physically. They may be worried about whether they have the skill to please someone in bed, or they may be worried about their experience. Maybe they don't have enough experience. Maybe they have what the other person thinks is too much experience with someone, and therefore they're already beating themselves up even before they get into the sexual situation just because of worries. The common theme between all of these things is that internal dialogue that is telling you just don't even try, or don't, or you're gonna fail if you do this. If you put yourself out there, you're gonna fail. And that goes right along with this mainline fear of rejection. It's like they're always paired together. So that is probably the most common fear for people who are just moving into a new relationship. or moving into or desiring of something new, like the single person's fear.
Mm-hmm.
The next one we move into is something that's more of a fear that occurs while you're with someone, or when you're thinking about things that are more long-term, more serious relationship situation. And that is, I'm going to bring it up on the board here.
Yep, there it is.
Where are we? There it is, the fear of commitment. So, anything you want to throw in here before I get into this next section? Is there something about the fear of commitment that tickles a part of your brain?
No, I think I have it. I'm on one of those. I'm the other side. I think I overcommit. So that's another.
What does that mean?
That's another conversation. But I've never been afraid about when I am with someone. I've never been afraid about should I be with this person, or should I feel like am I missing out on something else by dating this person? Blah blah blah. The normal reasons why you're trying to sort of get yourself out of a relationship, things like that. If I'm with somebody, I'm usually happy with that particular person, at least in the very beginning. I don't usually have necessarily the fears associated to standard commitment issues, which you can sort of talk about here in a sec.
Yeah. So if we think about commitment fears, immediately the images that come to mind are the guys that don't want to, that are basically telling the women, yeah, you're great, but I just don't think I need to be in a serious relationship right now. Like, that's just the standard romantic comedy line from the last 30, 40 years. But outside of the movies, in the real world, there are layers to this thing. And the beginning part of it is the fear of picking the wrong person. So, and this is really prevalent in online dating, in that people are, you can check this out in the Reddit forums all the time, the dating forums on Reddit. People are so worried that the person that they've had one or two dates with might not be the best thing that they can get. They keep getting swipes. They keep getting messages. Like there's something else out there. They're looking at people's pictures saying, yes, this person I went on a date with is attractive, but look at this person. Or this person's accomplished, but look at this person. There's always this sort of grass is greener thing going on. And this constant worry that maybe they'd be settling by sticking with this person. And by sticking with, I mean going on a third date or a fourth or beyond that. So this is not even necessarily big picture picking the wrong person. This is just in the very beginning of that initial connection with someone. It can extend to the long term. If you're with a person in a relationship and you've been together for a number of months, years, you still might feel that you're with the wrong person and have a fear of committing to them further because something in the back of your head says, I don't know if this is the one for me to go, to stay with all my life, or that everything, there's a lot of great stuff about this person, but there's this one thing that I never saw as being part of my dream, right? They're great in all these ways, but that one thing, or those couple things, I didn't see that being my life. That, that is not what I dreamed up. Some people are just afraid of losing their freedom, and that fear of commitment is rather just a fear of having someone dictate what they do with their free time, or that they are no longer just making all the decisions about themselves. This is like single people syndrome. This is, you'll see a lot of this kind of resistance early on in a serious relationship when you maybe move in together, or you start staying over at their place. They stay over yours more often, and you have to suddenly divide space and say, oh, well, in my house, we take our shoes off when we go inside. In my house, we don't throw our clothes on the couch, or we don't leave piles. We don't leave the dishes in the sink. You start thinking about all these little things, and suddenly someone else is telling you what you're supposed to be doing with yourself, and you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm an adult. I make my own decisions. Who are you to tell me that? Then you start taking those steps backward because you're like, whoa, I don't know. I'm not here to be told what to do. You sense that you're losing your freedom. Other people are motivated by the simple fact that they just don't want to make the same mistakes as their parents. If your parents divorced, if they fought a lot, if they have made decisions that you just wouldn't want to make in a relationship, some people fear a commitment because they think that's what a relationship has to look like, because that's what they've seen, that's what they grew up with. They say, oh, well, in my house, there was always yelling in the evenings and people screaming at each other, telling each other what to do, storming out. And they think that dysfunction and that sort of, even verbal abuse and those kind of emotional game manipulations, they just think that's built in and that has to be there. They may not consciously think that, but they may have a relationship with relationships that says it's going to be that way and it's going to hurt and it's going to be anxiety provoking, intense. And they're like, I just don't want that. So I'm just going to be the single person for my whole life. But I think that people listening here also need to be aware that they should not just be fooled by people who say, I just don't want to deal with the rules of a relationship that come along with a committed relationship, and I just want to bang a bunch of people and not have to be tied down. That's not actually fear of commitment. That is someone being selfish and just, wanting to play and wanting to have everything serve them. They call it fear of commitment. They say, oh, I don't know if I can do a relationship, but that's not the baseline. That's not where it's all generating from. Also, we have a lot of people who cheat, and cheating stems from issues with commitment. And I know that sounds kind of stupid, of course. If you're cheating, that's an issue with a commitment, but it's actually deeper than that. It's them not wanting to commit to someone, so they end up self-sabotaging in order to escape from that commitment, right? They maybe they know they're going to get caught, and that's going to be the end of that relationship, and then they're going to go on and do it again. Or maybe they aren't consciously aware that it's going to screw everything up, but they want to get simple needs met, even though the risk is ruining a committed relationship. And so that in itself is a kind of self-sabotage. So all of these things together are bound within the world of commitment and the fear of that. Z, did you have anything else you wanted to say before we step on to the next subtopic?
No, I think you hit on it. I mean, there are so many underlying factors associated to, quote, the fear of commitment. A lot of the times, though, I mean, like when you go back into the online dating perspective and that FOMO, that fear of missing out, that people treating relationships like a car they bought, and they maybe got the one category down of the car that they really wanted, and all of a sudden there is a sale for something that has all the bells and whistles in it, and they treat a possible relationship the same way. It really irks me, I think this is more of a personal thing than anything, but I've seen it happen where two people end up in a relationship, but the other one then breaks it off after a certain period of time, and because she or he feels that I can't commit to this. I think I'm just going to keep dating other people, even though you know that the person that they had met is very, very nice, very, attractive or otherwise, but they just reject them thinking it's like, oh, I can do just a little bit better. And in a way, you could also be doing the same thing where you're sabotaging what could be a very good relationship for you because of missing out of what could be out there. And I don't know. That's a personal choice in the end, but I just think that sometimes it's very short-sighted. So,
Sure.
mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm,
Um. So the next one, the next category here, is not something that I think most people don't necessarily think of it in the same way that I'm going to portray it. But just bear with me here, and I'll explain it out. I called it the fear of exposure, and by that I mean the fear that someone is going to see you how you see yourself. So a lot of this is founded on a sense of inadequacy or low self-worth, insecurity. If you are God's gift to the world and you are exposed to be that, that's not an issue, right? So this is not for everyone. This is not a fear that everyone necessarily has. But I think through the course of our lives, as we are human, at some point, people have felt overexposed or vulnerable. They felt inadequate, that they weren't enough in a situation. And oftentimes that can have effects that carry on throughout your life, and actually can lead to you making decisions about who you are and what you're capable of and what your future is going to look like. So, of course, that all bleeds into relationships. So, how willing someone is to show another person who they really are is totally dependent on how confident they are in themselves. Right? If
mm-hmm.
you know, and I'm saying you, but if you're looking at your partner and you're saying, you, as my partner, you should know me better than anyone else. And if you still don't want me when you know me that deeply, what does that mean about me? What does that mean about like how I can be loved in this world? So I think people are really deeply afraid of this kind of. It's not even that's not like an outright rejection. It is a. I mean, it's almost like not a rejection we could handle. We
Mm-hmm.
can be rejected because we approached the wrong way and stumbled over ourselves or said the wrong thing, and that's kind of fine. But if someone says, I I don't want the core of you. I don't want who you are to be in my life. That's a lot harder to deal with. So people will build walls and they will cover weak spots with other elements of their personality. Uh, they'll draw attention away from certain things. People learn techniques to avoid being seen, and um, and actually, that one of the knock-on effects is that people actually make poor relationship choices because they don't feel like they deserve to be treated better, or they don't want to be uh, exposed. They don't want to expose themselves to someone who they really value. They would rather have someone who they have a sense that they're not that great, so that they might not be able to judge them. That they might not be able to have. Uh, won't be as devastating if they get rejected by someone who, in their mind, isn't the best thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, People also who live kind of strange or unusual lifestyle have some issues with this fear of exposure. I see it a lot on the dating Reddits here, where it's like, I play Dungeons and Dragons and board games. I like Star Wars so much that I have all these figures in my house, and these people, they just have hobbies that they've gone really deep into, but they say to themselves, I can't date. I can't. No one's going to love me when I have this kind of crazy hobby or something, unless they find someone who has the exact same hobby or the same lifestyle. Um, which is it's just hard, especially if it's a kind of discreet kind of thing. But uh, the same thing applies to people with physical, mental, or emotional issues. I don't know if I should call them issues, but differences, and they might also tell themselves that that means that they can't date or find love. If you have a physical handicap, or a gnarly scar, or maybe you had to take medicine to balance your mood, or just sometimes you just get emotional. People will then tell themselves, I can't show that to someone else. I won't be accepted by a normie.
Mm-hmm.
And so they just opt out of it, or they make decisions to find people that they think are more worthy of them, who since they sort of like detract from their own value in themselves, and so then they connect to other people that they've already said this person doesn't have super high value, so they are attainable for me, and that can lead to issues, man.
So
Did you have something you want to say?
yeah, did you ever consider possibly race as also one of those things with regards to fear to exposure? And I want to explain this a little bit because um, I grew up as most likely the only Asian kid that I really knew in my immediate neighborhood. Really, I mean, it's like I grew up around, you know, white people, black people, but not really that many Asians. Nowadays, it's completely different. Like the Asian environment here, and especially where I live, is there's a large contingent of it. But I was the only one, and a lot of the times that the girls that I would be interested in were not of my race. So therefore, I sometimes thought that possibly, like, would they even really even consider dating somebody who wasn't, um, of their racial makeup, and would they be really willing to accept me with, like, we have different traditions, attitudes, things that we do at home that are not necessarily the same as a lot of normal. And when I mean normal, I mean like standard Americans that I used to know. I would go visit my friends, and they would be very similar in how they would treat dinner and what they would do and all this other stuff. And then in my home, it's like never ate pork, little things like that. We take our shoes off in the house. I remember that was a conversation that I had with my friend Jared. I was like, it's like, you got to take your shoes off. It's like, why? It's like that's what we do in our house. And what happens is like it's funny when it's with your friends and stuff like that, but when you're trying to sort of explain that to possibly a girl who's going to come over and do all sorts of other stuff, it could be a little odd, and that fear has a tendency to build up after a while if you want to go out. And I didn't know if that was that something maybe that you considered as possible being a as an exposure topic, because it was one of those things in which I have a unique perspective on it from myself, but it doesn't really apply to a lot of people.
Yes, that absolutely fits in this category.
Hmm.
uh, and it not because there is something inherently lesser about any race, but because you, as a person of whatever race,
Hmm.
decided be, that meant that you were coming from a weaker standpoint when it came to approaching the girls of the majority, or that you were somehow inadequate. And
Hmm.
so, and again, it's not like inadequate, like I don't have class to go do this, or like
No, I,
it's not
I
like
I
you
completely
it's
understand
something
what you're
you
talking
can
about.
taste.
Yeah.
It's like it's a sense of who am I, and what does that mean to these other people, right?
So yeah, well, the way I equate it, and I don't know, please say if I'm wrong here, but in recent years, the sort of nationalistic pride of America, for example, has been played up in media, in the way that they like the government sort of shows how you should be. I'm an American, but my family and the rest of my family come from non-American backgrounds. So this sort of fear is like, well, we're not traditional American apple pie family. We do this, and how would it affect uh, myself in a relationship with somebody else who might think that America number one is the way that people should live, whereas we have different traditions and different beliefs in certain things. So, uh, is that basically what you're trying to say? I mean, like, in a way, it's just being afraid that even though your beliefs or your culture or whatever it is that you feel like is different, you believe it's somehow lesser than what the norm is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's
Hmm.
self-worth and self and identity is multifaceted, and you can actually be in the majority. I say this like you can be from an element of culture in an area that is dominant and have self-worth issues, or you can be in the tiniest minority within a minority and have all kinds of confidence, and this cannot affect you. But it just comes down to the person and their experience, and oftentimes how much success they've had.
Hmm.
If you become very successful doing these things, making these connections, dating, your sense of exposure will sort of fade away, or fear of it at least. Whereas if you are avoidant and not even putting yourself out there, the fear of exposure will build. And if you have self-esteem issues, then it can also build. So yeah, that's definitely applies here. Um, if we want to, we can move on to the fourth one, fourth
Yes, we
and final,
can. Yes.
and that is the fear of loneliness. And this is also pervasive. It is something that people deal with not just in their teenage years when they're trying to date, but all throughout their life, even to the very end of your days. People have a sense of connectedness with their family, friends, small community, larger community, nation, world. But as it relates to dating and love, loneliness can take place at any point in the entire process. And it can be there when you're completely surrounded, when you are, when you've got a husband or wife and children around you all the time, you can feel lonely. So it is a very personal kind of emotion. And so we'll just look at a few ways that people commonly experience it. But this is, I mean, we could have an entire deep dive on loneliness itself
Yep.
because it's so deep. So we're just going to go kind of touch on the surface here. And some of this, I think, something will resonate with you, I think. We'll get to it, though. The first one are the never singles. These are the people that are in their desire to avoid loneliness. They just make sure that they've always got someone. So you'll see them. I think I coined the term early on in Twitch line, the sugar gliders. Do you
Yep.
remember that?
Yep. I do.
They're basically like jumping from one thing to the next to the next to the next, making sure that they don't have to be single, because single is the worst thing that could ever happen to someone. And oh my God, I just need to have someone in my life. If I had to eat dinner by myself, I would just die.
Mm-hmm.
That's these people. Their fear of loneliness will make them connect and stay with people that they aren't even really into or that treat them poorly. It's just anything is better than being alone. Another common one, these next two are, again, all over the Reddit dating and relationship forums. Good enough to, but not good enough to date. So people that they're lonely, and so they get into physical relationships with people that are not emotionally available or actually physically available, or that aren't really that into them. So they will connect with them, go to bed, and then in some period of time, whether shortly after or after a few more connections like that, they'll get the message that, oh, you know, it was fun, but ...
Mm-hmm.
So that drive to be connected and not be alone has them making connections with people that they didn't really, that was never really fleshed out. They didn't really know them deeply enough to know that this person really wasn't that into them, or that they were going to just, screw them and leave, or that they didn't respect them enough to tell them up front what their plans were. That it was, they didn't want just something casual, that they wanted something real. And so, you got to do your do your due diligence. That was a hard one. And make sure you know that the people you're connecting with are people that you want to connect with. You extend this beyond to the people that are good enough to date but not enough to marry. And these are the types that will be dating someone for 9 years and still not married. And I mean, and again, this is not to say that marriage is the end for
Yeah.
everyone. That is the necessary path. But for those of you that do want to get married, that are in a never-ending dating situation, it could be that the motivation for you to maintain that is because you don't want to be alone. You don't want to leave this person and have to start over with someone else, or have to put yourself back out there. And while you're good enough to date into infinity, if the person's not pulling the plug and pulling the trigger to say, let's let's get fianced and then let's get married, then it could be motivated by that avoidance of ending it just to try to find something better, or something that will meet your needs. And the last one in this category is a more culturally bound one, and that's not good enough for that person's family. And this is where I thought you might have something extra to say, because I know you come from a culture where family acceptance of your significant other is really important. So did you want to speak to that a little bit, or?
No, the thing about it is that I come from a culture, of course, where the family is very involved in relationships. It is not uncommon that I think in Western relationships that family members are not necessarily introduced to possibly somebody that you're dating for a while. Like it's one of those things in which it's like you could be dating somebody for 3 or 4 months, and they have never met who you were dating, and that is common. That's completely normal in a lot of cases. So, in my culture, if they disapprove of them right away, you'll know about it, and it'll also be a big trigger point to a lot of people, because they will be asking, "Have you met so and so's person that they're dating?" Yeah, I really don't approve of that particular person, or that particular person really does not mesh who we think that who's Hodo should be going out with. It is not good. Maybe we should find him somebody new, because maybe he doesn't know exactly who he should be looking for. Blah blah blah, stuff like that. It's pretty interesting, because that usually happens very very early on. So that whole family not good enough for the family thing doesn't necessarily happen later. In my culture, in fact, it'll actually happen a little earlier. So you can probably speak to that, maybe, because I in your personal relationship, did your parents meet Emily like right away, or was it something later on where they met your wife?
Well, when I first met my wife,
Uh-huh.
we were just dating. I was living in Beijing,
Mm-hmm.
so that was the opposite side of the world from where my family is. So they did
Mm-hmm.
not meet her there. Then, when we the first time they met her was when we came back to visit after we'd been pretty seriously involved, and I guess within the first year of dating, and they met her, and no bad news. They liked her a lot, and so then it was much easier to tell them that we were engaged, and that was again over Skype from Abu Dhabi, so further around the world.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't really, at least in my family, they're not the kind of people that will shut down someone's relationship unless it's a dangerous thing. They will say what they think, but most of the time you get the real story after that person's gone. After you have the breakup, they're like, well, yeah, we didn't really see you with that person, which is nice but not really helpful. It would be good to know that during, but it's I'm of a typical American family, so it's they kind of like let you do your own thing.
Yeah, see, it's completely different the other way. Like in my culture, it's like if they really don't like who you're dating, they let you know right away. And I'll give you an anecdote about that right now. It's a person who I call my brother. He's actually my cousin when you look at it through the family tree, but he's my brother in every other sense. He is very successful, got his degree from a very prestigious university, started working for a prestigious government organization that does world things, and he was desperately in love with a person that his family had not met yet. And but he really was like head over heels for her. I think, were dating, I want to say about a month or so, like that. And then she comes over to my house, and she, to me, is a relatively nice person. I think she's great. But immediately, the older members of my family who happen to be there do not like her. For what reason, I to this day have no idea. But they immediately started hatching a plan to break them up and arrange something completely different so that this will not end up happening. And within a span of 6 to 8 months, she was out of the picture. So, and the thing about it is like he wasn't the first one that apparently this had happened to. This also happened to my father's brother. It was my uncle, who they did not approve of the person that he was dating in college at the time, and found somebody better. So,
and they just have to accept that?
It's not that they don't have to accept that, but there is a lot of pressure to say, hey, look, you can do this, but just know ahead of time, nobody likes her. So they are straight up with the things that it's to a point. It's very honest, because you've had relationships where they've broken down and your parents and friends tell you afterwards, it's like, yeah, that was freaking terrible, because you're trying to save your feelings about it, because like, you know what, we don't want to come in and look like jerks and say, hey, look, this should be for you. You shouldn't be in this relationship, because the mentality is that you shouldn't be intruding. The mentality in our culture and in my family is that we're absolutely involved. So therefore, we need to know, and we need to be part of the decision-making process that you're going through. Now, it can be a little extreme when looked upon from other cultures, and I completely agree, because what happened to my brother specifically was something I never understood for a long time. And whether it was in a way like, this shouldn't be happening, or they just didn't like her, or there was something that I wasn't privy to, because I always thought she was a nice person. But in the end, it's like, you know what? Nope, his decision making is off. We're gonna have to do it ourselves. So it's like, and then okay. But they didn't make him marry his wife. They basically put him in a situation where he could basically make the decision on his own. So, is it
I'm gonna
arranged?
make you an offer you can't
Can't
refuse.
refuse. Exactly. That's exactly what happened. And like, and the thing about it is he ended up having a great. Like, he's married to this day. He's been married 20 plus years. They have 3 kids, 2 of which are already out of college, and one
Does
is
his wife know the story?
possibly. Think so.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting answer.
I mean, the thing about it is like you tell that story to, I guess, like a Western culture, and they're like, what business do they have being the decision makers with regards to the relationship? And the answer my family would say is that it would make it a burden for her to be part of our family if nobody likes her. And that is a straight up answer that is sort of G in a way when you really think about it, because there are so many things that you depend on family for. Everything from medical issues to who raises what and financial things, all sorts of different things that a lot of times I feel like Western families don't really take into consideration sometimes. The reality of it all, because they try to avoid the conversation, whereas our family is just straight up about the whole thing. It can be very jarring. It can be very stressful. It can be very emotionally damn sort of tiring. That's the word. Emotionally tiring, because there are just so many things that possibly you just don't want to deal with, but you're just confronted with it up front, and they're completely honest with it about it. And it is, when you really think about it, it can be sort of crazy, but at the same time, it's refreshingly honest. And, in a way, it prevents, family members from straying too far. But it doesn't prevent it 100%, because there are people who, in our family, who said, screw that. That's not for me. I'm not going to listen. The family, in the end, realizes that it is their decision, and we can't 100% make you. We can strongly suggest with a whole lot of things that we can say, but in the end, it is still your decision. But that is the fear that a lot of when it comes to family, and if you're really with the family and you have strong familial bonds, and there are Western families that I know have that that if a family member came out and said, like, I don't think you should be really marrying this person, or I think this is not somebody that you should be doing it, especially early on in a relationship. Maybe it's a grandmother or somebody like that who is like a matriarch of a family. That can really play into a decision of whether or not you want to date, that you're going to end up dating the person or not. And that happens too.
Right.
So.
So to pull it back, to draw it back to where we came from with the fear of loneliness, in this case, the loneliness would become, if you decide to choose that person over your family, there would be an extreme loneliness, because you would be cut off. You might be blacklisted from your family if it's a very traditional family, or if they've decided that that person was so wrong that it throws off the whole dynamic. They don't want to be part of it. So you could end up distancing yourself from a very core part of your family, social circle, group. It could extend on and on.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the other side of that equation is, if you have pressure to marry someone that you're not completely crazy about, but who your family is really crazy about, then there's the fear of loneliness that you're now connected to someone that you don't necessarily feel that what you feel like you should feel to be with them in a marriage, or going on in your life together.
For
And
those
that's another kind
interested,
of loneliness.
for those interested in seeing rejection of whether or not you're good enough for somebody's family, go watch Crazy Rich Asians. That, even though it's a comedy, it is a very good depiction of what happens if family members and friends don't necessarily accept you for who you are, and the troubles that can lead to it. And in that particular case, he goes against his family's wishes, and the girl in that case, Constance Wu, actually proves herself to the mother. So it's a little different, because happy ending, blah blah blah. But Not all relationships, especially with where family gets involved, end up in sort of happily ever afters. But it is a great example of somebody having to deal with the loneliness of possibly rejecting their own family and having to go off with this other person. So, and the considerations
Indeed.
of what could happen.
Yep, very true. So, to move this forward a little bit, we got to wonder ourselves, like, why is fear so powerful? Why is it such? Why is it? Why are we letting it make these massive life decisions for us? And I think that it always comes back to avoidance. Like, if we avoid something that we deem negative or harmful, then we end up developing a relationship with avoidance, and that relationship is empowered by repetition. So we avoid. The fear grows because we have not had any outcome that proves anything differently. Like, we just have been avoiding. So we don't have like a success story to say, okay, maybe my fear was misplaced or should be let go of. And then sometime whenever we have our fears realized, then it becomes proof that we were right to avoid it. Oh my God, look what happened. I got rejected. That means something. So it turns into this big cycle. And, you always see, whenever people ask you, oh, what's the, if you had to recommend one book, or what's the best book you've ever read, I tend to suggest one called The Science of Fear by Daniel Gardner. And it is not about relationships and love, but it can, the ideas about it can be applied to it. But in general, it just breaks down what is fear, why do we experience it, how is it applied, how is it used to control the way we think and the way we behave in society, and how do we dismantle it so that we can live the life that we want to live. And it's amazing. It's very, very smart. Like, when you read it, you kind of will look in the mirror and say, I'm kind of a dumbass. I've been living my life like a fool in certain ways. And
It is also
honestly,
available. It is available on
what?
Amazon here on paperback
Sure.
for $15.19.
Yeah, or get the audio one and play it in the car after you listen to our podcast. No, it's just, it's not for everyone. Some parts of it read kind of like a scholarly journal, gets into science more deeply in certain areas. So, depends on you. But, yeah, man, it's a good one. And it speaks to kind of what we're talking about here tonight. And I think one important way that we deal with conquering our fears is learning how to assess risk and doing that in a healthy way. So, there are a few questions I think we can ask ourselves to begin dismantling fear and to conquer this whole cycle of avoidance. And the initial question you ask yourself is, what purpose does my fear serve? Right? Why am I afraid of this? What can possibly go wrong? And what is the fear doing for me? Is it protecting me? Right? You're afraid of a bear for good reasons. And if you think about it, what purpose does that fear serve? You get to live. If you see a bear and you get out of there, you get to live. There's your purpose served. But if you think about this as it relates to dating and love and relationships, what purpose does the fear of walking up and talking to someone that you find attractive, like, where is the fear, the genuine fear, coming from? What is, and this is the next question you ask yourself, what is the worst case scenario? What could happen? Like, walking up and talking to that girl across the bar is not going to get you killed unless your boyfriend is a freak. Worst case scenario for most people is you just get rejected, and people, they don't like that. It doesn't feel good. But if you think about it, is it something to be deeply afraid of? Is it something to keep you from possibly falling in love and possibly having great sex and possibly having another emotional connection to a person? Like, is there a balance there? And then the third question you ask yourself is, what can I do to minimize the effects of this bad outcome, this thing that I'm so afraid of? Right? How can I take steps to increase the chances I'll do well and minimize the chances I'll do bad? One way, and this is used all the time in psychology, is systematic desensitization, which is incremental steps towards the thing that you're afraid of, and finding that you're, somewhat uncomfortable, and then slowly more comfortable, and then fine with the idea of saying hello to a girl. No, there's no asking her out on a date. There's no asking for a number. There's no
Mm-hmm.
going in for the kiss. Like, all that stuff can come later. This is just the very, 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 very first step. Hey, how are you? And then walk on. If you can get there, then maybe, hey, how are you? Beautiful day today. Whatever. These little inching forward, inching forward, inching forward, as you find your successes and as you become less sensitized to the fear of rejection, failure, the end of the world for some of you, um, you'll be able to conquer your fear there. And then for some people, it's just about ripping off the Band-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks. It's going to happen, but just doing it, realizing you didn't die and you're okay, and you'll be able to get through it. Or even just removing those protections that keep you from getting what you want in love, right? Those walls that you built up, learning how to bring them down a little bit, learning how to be vulnerable. Those things can help you to manage your fears, to assess honest risk, real risk, and to move through it in a healthy way. Because what's at stake if we let fear dictate our love lives? Right? You can miss out on some fun on a Saturday night, or you can miss out on the love of your life, and you don't know. So
Is it a
yeah, go
mentality
ahead.
thing? Like people treat
Yeah.
the fear of the unknown now as something to be frightful about. And I'm trying to avoid the use fear, but it is they use the unknown as something that is to be frightful. When I
That's
was
always been the case.
Yeah, it has been, but there have been people in my youth who have tried to tell me it's like, you know what, the unknown sometimes is something that can be very, very enjoyable and very surprising. You just can't look at the situation uh, at all times to be something to be scared about. And I think current society has an issue um, with fear, and I don't know if it is one of those things in which that events in the last 20 years have taught people that the unknown is something to be afraid of always, and that you should treat it as such, and therefore you end up creating um, a group of people who are generally like frightful of things that are happening, as opposed to an optimistic crowd who are more likely to take the unknown uh, with less fear, but to be something that they could look forward to, that could have negative repercussions to it, but could also have exciting and wonderful side effects that are unanticipated. Um, because as I talk to a lot of the community that I'm in, I'm most likely, especially in the gaming and casting community that I'm in, I deal with a lot of younger people. People are in their high school and college years, and they live with an anxiety that I don't remember seeing when I grew up. Um, an anxiety that sometimes overwhelms them regarding talking to people and not knowing exactly how to act or what is going to happen going forward if they do this, and they overthink it. And it is just it seems to me it's just very unusual that had that side effect of the unknown, something that I've always thought of as, yeah, be careful, but it can be really cool to, you know what, it's always dangerous, so you should always be frightful and really just be on guard at all times, which I don't necessarily know is right or wrong. So,
People cannot help but be people.
mhm.
And by that I mean It is in human nature to be protective of yourself and of your family and those close to you.
Hmm.
The So we have superficial exposure to so many scary, dangerous things these days that it creates the sense that those things are somehow more real or more likely to happen to us and be harmful. When before the advent of the internet, we had paper news and TV. Before TV, we had paper news. Before that, I mean, like radio, whatever. But like at some point, the things you were afraid of were just what people told you about in your small community.
Hmm.
You were not afraid of the barbarian hordes running around half a world away because those did not ever in any way connect with you. So today, everything's accessible. You open the news and you will hear about terrorist attacks, you will hear about child molestation rapists, you will hear about serial killers, you'll hear about cop killing. I mean, all this stuff is put to you as though it's happening in your backyard. And that if you don't lock your door, it's going to happen to you. There are people that are more afraid of terrorists than they are of, what's going to really kill them, which is heart disease.
Hmm. Yeah.
And instead of taking efforts to like eat better, they're going and buying a whole bunch of weapons, and you know, and teaching their kids to be afraid of what they don't understand, what they don't know. So this all applies. So when it comes to our love lives, us being afraid is based off of what we see around us and what we're told. And there are trends in life and love and relationship. There are trends in dating. There are things like that. Like all these new terms that keep popping up with the way people treat each other. People are not treating each other in a way that they haven't in the past. It's just there are new ways to communicate, and therefore variations of the things that happened in the past. Instead of someone just sleeping with you and disappearing into the night, never seeing you again, moving to another city or something, or going back home to their family.
Or getting a pack of cigarettes and never coming back.
Right. Now you can ghost someone by not answering their text message anymore.
Yeah.
Same concept, but it's not like it's totally new. So the people that are afraid of things, a lot of times they are taught to be afraid because it's just hyper sensationalized and it's put in their face, and they're just unable to avoid the things that are supposed to make them afraid. So it's not just about being afraid of what you don't know. It's also being afraid of what you don't personally have real experience with. You see and hear what's going around you, and then you become afraid of the possibility of that happening to you. I mean, then and if you get ghosted 17 times, you're not going to be afraid of it. You're going to hate it, but you know it. So I think there's a lot of that, and I think people end up living into these like these cycles of relationship failure because of the same fears.
Okay.
That's my take. I can easily apply this to politics and a whole bunch of other stuff too, but I'll leave that for another day, maybe a Thursday.
We'll leave that for Thursday for sure. And the thing about it is also, it's like I know that there are people who end up starting not fearful, but after certain incidents in their lives, in their dating lives specifically, constant rejection, just bad outcomes, things like that, they end up becoming and developing fear out of past horrible experiences, and it's that I think we didn't really necessarily go over too much, but like that that person who goes on all of those dates and just doesn't end up getting or finding the thing and ends up becoming jaded, which was one of those things that we talked about in a previous show. Instead of becoming jaded, they end up becoming afraid because if I just expose myself again to another person, I'm just going to end up being rejected again, so I don't really want to do that. And, that happens too, and you have to also be careful about that happening too. But that, I think, could be something completely different, so... Just wanted to throw
Sure
that out there.
thing.
Yeah.
Yep. Uh, so I think we're pretty close to wrapping up here. Um, just before we go, I wanted to give a little like personal anecdote, just to give you a sense of how, we're sitting here talking about this stuff, trying to share, advice and sort of a way of thinking to help people out there. But we are also human, and we also go through these same things that we're talking about. So I thought I'd tell you about my younger years, where I had a pretty awkward childhood / teenage, basically up through college. I was a fantasy book reading, Dungeons and Dragons nerd, and this is back when nerds were,
Not cool.
these days anyone can do anything, and you're not really going to get teased too much for being a video game player. Back when I was a kid, if you played too many video games and read fantasy novels, you were basically like fringe loser. I was super skinny. You could see my ribs in the front and the back. Acne, thick glasses, zero style. Got bullied, and ended up with a case of ugly duckling syndrome. So even when I kind of grew into my body, started going to the gym, cleared up my skin, and became, able to get attention from women, I still had the sense that I was undesirable. People were going to reject me, make fun of me, just a lot of issues with that. So, but I let it mean to me that I just wasn't going to be successful with women, and that led to missed opportunities. So if someone did try to show attention to me, I would say, "Oh, they probably just were being friendly or just being polite, or it was just attention." But like, if they actually got to know me, if I was exposed, then they wouldn't want to be with me. So for me, what it really took to overcome that was, well, my first girlfriend. Like, if you had gone to my school and seen me, you would have probably said that guy will never have a girlfriend. But I had a summer job, and I was a lifeguard, and I met a girl there who was also a lifeguard and started dating her. She went to a different school. No one knew her. She didn't know me, so no one could tell her that I was a loser or whatever back at my school. And when I showed up to my school with her at my prom, a whole bunch of people in my school were like, "What the hell?" And she wasn't ugly or anything, so
No, they didn't believe
that
she
was further.
exists. I actually do.
Right.
I was around at this particular time, and I had met her. She was a perfectly nice girl. I did not know about people not believing Acorn here didn't have a girlfriend, but I knew her, and she was perfectly nice girl. And when they went to prom, I was there with my own date, and like she walks in, and everybody's like, "Who the hell is that?" I was like, "Oh, that's it. That was his girlfriend." It's like, wait a minute, I thought she didn't exist. I thought he was making it up. It's like, why the hell would you think he would be making shit like that up? It's like, what, like the girlfriend that lives in Canada that nobody really knows? That story.
My internet girlfriend.
The internet, yeah.
Yeah, we had the internet back then.
We did, barely. We had America Online. I don't know if that actually counts as real internet, but yeah, I mean,
my girlfriend was probably a 45-year-old dude, but I didn't know. It was through text.
Yeah.
Anyways, I digress. The way I overcame it was just from basically having success somewhere, because I thought I was a fine person to talk to. I thought I was funny. I thought I could do that. And through that, this person showed interest in me in a way that I couldn't deny. I couldn't say, okay, this person is being too polite or just being friendly, or whatever. Like, there's romantic interest. So it was just that experience of it. And then moving from that to gaining the courage to ask someone out, or to start off as going to eat together and things like that, and it sort of turning into a relationship. And beyond that, I just didn't have any issues with it. I was okay. I had redefined my relationship with those anxieties and fears, and it did not ever occur to me after that again as something to be concerned with. And that is what a lot of people on the internet would be like, oh, well, that's just, you're just confident. You're just confident. Well, you have to get there. And that's
Mm-hmm.
how I got there.
It's a good story.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's where I'm at. I don't know if you wanted to share your story. I think you almost started off sharing a story.
Well, I did start off
So,
sharing a story about a girl that, I regretted never approaching. And as I said, like a lot of the girls that I liked or I knew were girls that I already had some sort of relationship with. And what I mean by relationship is I already knew them. I didn't, especially when I was growing up, I really didn't interact with a lot of people. I didn't really have a lonely existence, but it was one of those things in which I would more than likely have known the person if I wanted to approach them or I actually developed feelings for somebody like that beforehand. I was never the type of person to just sort of cold go out with anybody. And a lot of the fears that I had were a lot of the fears of rejection and the fears of, hey, he asked that person out. Isn't that funny? Of course he was going to get rejected. Blah blah blah. The fear of embarrassment that that attempt to say, oh, he asked about, that's hilarious, and that was all in my head. A lot of it was one of those things in which it was self-inflicted because I even though like you knew a lot of people, I was always under the impression that if I made a misstep socially, whereas like I put myself out there saying that I was going to see if I can go out with this particular person and I was rejected, that it would be looked upon very funny. It's like, I don't even understand why you tried, but nobody would ever say that. It was always more internally, like, the fear of somebody actually coming up to you. It's like, I can't believe you asked that, or you asked her out. You were never going to have a chance. That was all in my head, and all the things that I used to say to myself to psych me out to not do anything. And in the end, after a while, you realize that it's just not productive to think that way. I ended up taking a job where you have to be very forward. You have to be able to talk to people. You have to be able to handle rejection because you're going to have to handle rejection on a daily basis. And you can't linger over it. You sort of have to do it and go forward and deal with it. And that actually ended up helping me in the long run, saying like, you know what? If it happens, it happens. You let it happen. You let it sort of brush off your back, and you go to the next opportunity. Because you know what? You can't linger on those failures or those fears of people trying to put you down, or even thinking that somebody's going to put you down. It's not worth it. It is not inherently something that you really need to be really afraid about. And that was a lot of the things that sort of held me back from doing some of the stuff. So I look back upon it and I find it sort of hilarious at the same time as the way that I really thought about it that way. But in the end, it's like, as there are people, a lot of people who are restrained from actions that possibly could help them move forward or even find something that might be amazing because of their fears of things that aren't necessarily things that are real and or in any way would happen in situations. And you just have to sort of get over it and go. But it's sort of harder to do than it is to say in a lot of cases. So like, us sharing our experiences like this will show people that these things can be overcome and easily sort of confronted without any agita that would come through. Again, agita might be the word, might not be the right word, but it's a word. It's a what
it's
is it?
definitely a word.
Yeah, well, it's a word that that describes weird nervousness inside you. Like it describes like most of the time it's like or when it's in Yiddish it describes like if you've eaten something bad. Oh man, it gives you agita. Well, the same thing can be described if you are having an emotional crisis over something, and it is just giving you stomach pains, or in other terms, just internal strife really describing what's going on. That's exactly what happens when people have to sort of face whether or not they want to do something, especially in a relationship, or want to try to get something done in a relationship. It can be very problematic in that way. So,
for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So, all of this stuff being said, and from our own personal experiences, you can see that fear exists. We all have it. You have it. And it is manageable. And you can use it to protect you, but you need to not let it limit you. So, hopefully, this gives you all something to think about and chew on. And maybe you can start looking into the areas of your life that might be limited by your own fears.
Correct.
So, do you have anything saying on the way out?
No, I think this has just been one of the more interesting conversations that we had overall, and I hope everyone who has listened finds everything interesting. So, and it's just one of those things that I think everybody can relate to, a situation or otherwise, with regards to what we've discussed today, and I hope people can overcome the whatever fear it is that is stifling them from going forward.
All right, then. You want to lead us on out then?
Yeah. All right. So that's going to do it for us tonight. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and listening to our Sunday Focus segment here on what fear and why fear is your worst enemy in love. Just a reminder to everyone, our email address here is twitchlinelove@gmail.com. You can email us articles, questions, things you want us to talk about, a lot of stuff. We'll read your emails out here on the channel on one of our days. Could be Thursday, Wednesday, Sunday, whatever it is, but we'd love to hear from you. You can tweet us also at Twitchline if you want to drop us a quick comment. Also, we are on YouTube. For those who have watched us on YouTube, hello. Just search Twitchline Relationship Help and Advice, and you'll find our channel there. Drop a subscribe if you want, so therefore you know when we go live on YouTube. And you can also have access to all of our archived material there, and you can watch previous shows, focus segments, even Freeform Thursdays, where you can just sort of watch us goof around and talk about all sorts of random topics. You can also take us on the go on SoundCloud. Just listen to Twitchline. Just search Twitchline Relationship Advice. You'll find our channel. You'll see all of our shows that we put up. We try to update that as best as we can. And you can take us on the go on your mobile device, on your iPads, laptops, anything that can run SoundCloud. But for Acorn, I am Hodo. Thank you so much for joining us today on this Sunday Focus segment. We'll be back on Wednesday around 10 o'clock. We'll be trolling the depths of Twitch. Of Reddit, to help maybe find questions that might relate and help people who have been true listeners to the channel, as we normally do on Wednesdays, and we will try to give full-fledged answers to everyone that posts real questions about the issues that they have there on Reddit. But for Acorn, again, I am Hodo. Thanks so much for joining us this evening, and we will talk to you next time.
Good night.